Welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman, a podcast loaded with practical tips, powerful scripts, personal stories, and simple steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. So get ready to get the information you need to make the impact you want from someone you trust, your friend, parenting expert, Dr. Robyn Silverman.
Hello and welcome to this edition of How to Talk to Kids About Anything, where we give you the tips, scripts, stories, and steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. I'm so honored to be your host, Dr. Robyn Silverman, child and teen development specialist, author and speaker, and most importantly, parent of two great kids who give me the opportunity to love, learn, and grow every single day, whether I want to or not. Believe me, I get it. It's not always easy, but as you know by now, we're in this together, and we have some wonderful people helping us along the way. Now, perhaps like me, you remember mean girl behavior being relegated to middle school or high school, being ostracized, gossiped about, teased, berated, or made to feel inferior. I certainly was a victim of it. Perhaps you were too, and it was terrible. But there seems to have been some kind of age compression of sorts that has happened, where the ugly behavior we once saw in the teen years is now happening in younger grades, where competition and social humiliation is on the rise. What we once discussed regarding queen bees and cliques in 5th and 6th grade is now the buzz of 1st and 2nd graders. It can no longer be ignored, and we must address this right now. Katie Hurley, LCSW, has been on our show before in a popular episode on stress and children, and she is back to talk about young girls and relational aggression in the elementary school years. Katie is a child and adolescent psychotherapist, parenting expert, and writer. She is the founder of Girls Can empowerment groups for girls between the ages of 5 and 11. Hurley is the author of the Happy Kid Handbook and the forthcoming No More Mean Girls, an awesome book. I got to read it. I'm so excited about it. And her work can be found in the Washington Post, PBS Parents, and U.S. News and World Report, among other places. She practices psychotherapy in the South Bay area of Los Angeles and earned her BA in Psychology and Women's Studies from Boston College and her MSW from the University of Pennsylvania. She splits her time between California and Connecticut with her husband and 2 children. I am so excited to have you back on the show, so welcome again, Katie Hurley, to How to Talk to Kids About Anything.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be back. What an honor.
Yes, so exciting. And we had a great time talking the last time. And I know that people have probably already heard you speak about this, but we're shifting directions here. You know, before we get really started today, you have changed gears a little bit. We chatted about stress and how to help raise joyful kids in a stressed out world. Now we're talking about No More Mean Girls, your forthcoming book we're extremely excited about. We were talking about relational aggression and self-esteem. So what or who prompted this more recent interest?
Well, I mean, it seems like it's a more recent interest because the book is coming out now, but I will say I've been at this for just shy of 20 years working with kids and adolescents, and I primarily work with girls. I do work with boys too, but I tend to have a lot of girls roll through my office, and I've kind of seen firsthand the shift from 20 years ago when this stuff was happening at the middle school level to, you know, cut forward to today, 2017, 2018 coming up on, and it's happening in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, sometimes even kindergarten and 1st grade. So I've seen this pushing down of mean girl behavior, and it's come through my office. I've seen it in the groups I run. I've seen it when I'm at schools consulting and things. So I really started to look at it and say, we've got to figure out what has changed, how we got here, and what we can do to help these girls at younger ages so that they can learn to build each other up and be uplifters.
Mm-hmm. So important, and it is disturbing that it's happening younger. When I was in elementary school, I certainly dealt with my fair share of relational aggression towards like the end of elementary school. I was ostracized mercilessly in 5th grade, which is now sort of middle school time period. So it happened so much that I dare say that it was a pivotal year that shaped some of the way I view female relationships even today. It was so integral and into how I view the world, how I view friendships. Just a huge impact on me, and it had a huge impact on young people. And people sometimes, they'll look at this and say, this is just girl drama. So I would love to know, how do you respond to that?
I find that really frustrating when people boil it down to girl drama or say things like, well, that's a rite of passage. That's just part of growing up girl. This stuff does not have to be part of growing up girl. If we continue to look the other way and make those bland statements, it will continue. But we really don't need to just prepare our girls to survive this kind of stuff. We can help them to be the change agents that stop this sort of stuff from happening. So I think, what I find is that a lot of it stems from poor social skills that haven't been taught or haven't been internalized. Right. From anxiety and from low self-esteem. When we sort of like hit those three prongs and we figure out where is the behavior stemming from, we can help girls correct it.
Mm-hmm. No, I like what you're saying here, and I do find it up to be a frustrating statement, that sort of idea that we're just going to boil it down to girl drama, just like in the same way that I dislike that boys will be boys kind of idea. We're just sort of shove it in that box and say, well, yeah, you're right, just like you were saying, it's a rite of passage. But a lot of things have changed since we were young. Time has passed. My daughter, who's now currently 8, almost 9, she's already talked about over the last 2 years that some girls on the playground are mean. They don't allow other people to play. They have their own clubs. They call people names. And she's visibly very shaken, upset by it, and we have had to have conversations about it. I don't remember having that kind of situation when I was in 2nd and 3rd grade. So what is changing in girlhood, and why are younger and younger girls engaging in relational aggression?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors at play. And so we have to sort of widen our lens and look at the whole arc of the behaviors and why we're seeing this happen. Things are different in childhood than they used to be. 30 years ago, when kids were in school, if things came up, teachers had the time and space to deal with them both swiftly and make them into sort of life lessons for the whole classroom. Mm-hmm. So, and I even remember being in 4th grade, and I tell this story in my book, but being in 4th grade and 2 friends, we had a play date on a Saturday, and you didn't call them play dates then, you were just at someone's house. Yeah. But, we were over at someone's house, and we came up with this really funny name, what we thought was a really funny name for a club. We really didn't know what a club was. We were young, but we thought that the Smelly Sneakers would just be this really funny name. So we spent the day making all these posters for the Smelly Sneakers Club. The club was nothing but a couple of posters. It didn't have meetings. It had no organization whatsoever, just a funny name and some cute posters. And we talked about it at recess the following Monday because we were still sort of hopped up on the idea and the funny name. And another child told on us. Well, within 45 minutes, we were pulled inside and talked about how clubs are exclusive. And when you form clubs, then you leave people out. And we weren't upset. We were not punished. We weren't sent to the principal. We just had a chat with the teacher. And then the teacher sort of made it into a lesson later when everybody else came back in about, well, how do you include other people? And what happens if you start one club and not everybody's invited to it?
What a great teacher.
What a great teacher. Yeah. And she had the time to do that. And we never did that thing again. That was kind of the end of the Smelly Sneakers. And we laugh about it, and we really had no intention to leave anybody out. We just thought we were being funny. Mm-hmm. So, those lessons used to happen more regularly in the classroom. Right. And at home. Yes, kids had more free time. They were outside a lot. They were playing together a lot. They were solving problems on their own. They were really in the trenches of childhood, just learning how to get along and how to work through a conflict. 30 years ago, a bunch of kids couldn't agree on the rules to a game. The game ended, and that was the end of the fun. Mm-hmm. So they figured out how to agree on the rules and how to adapt it so that everybody was happy, so that the game continued. Mm-hmm. Well, kids don't have that ability anymore because they're not just out wandering, looking for a group of pals, playing, making stuff up. Their lives are very scripted. They're constantly being told what to do by adults, whether they're in an art class or a team sport or anything. They have adults leading them, guiding them, telling them exactly how to do things. and they're not sort of learning more organically on their own anymore. So that really has affected girlhood because their social skills are different. If they're not being taught something specifically, they're not getting it. And so a lot of girls aren't, they don't know exactly how to relate. They know that they want to have a group of friends. They know that they like certain things, but they don't necessarily know how to communicate well with other girls. So we see a lot of the sort of recess stuff when they come to me, when it gets to my office, a lot of it boils down to miscommunications, misunderstandings, and just where you have one everybody has different personalities. So sometimes you have a really strong personality, and that girl sort of becomes the quote bossy one, or the queen bee, or the leader of the pack, whatever you want to call it. And then you have the quieter ones who don't feel like they can assert themselves, so they don't really speak up as much, and they don't know how to navigate it. So you start having problems. And the ones that you're likely to hear from are the quieter ones. Those are the ones who will say, well, these girls are mean, these girls don't let me in. And those girls will say, they will sit right in my office and say, well, we would let her in. It's just that we like to do this and she doesn't like to do this. And so, they have to learn how to manage conflict, how to work through things.
I think you're hitting on something really important, this idea of organic play. And you and I have talked about this in our previous podcast together on stress and play and sort of that natural going outside and picking up sticks and, playing in the dirt and, getting it done. I had this interesting conversation with a friend the other day who said that he was given a book. His mom had gotten this book from the library because they were getting rid of old books. The book was from the 1990s. It was on defiant children, and he's had some issues with his son. And he's like, how I knew it was not from today? There was this whole section on what if your child says that he does not want to come in from being outside. And it really kind of hit me because that's exactly how we were. We went outside, we, found whoever was outside. I would not come home until the streetlights came on at 6:00. There was a siren that sounded in town, and then we knew we were to be home. All that other time, we were playing. There was no adults, sort of kind of going in and guiding things. And I think you're right that the more time that they have for this organic play, the more they kind of understand on their own how to negotiate, how to nurture, how to be assertive, how to give in sometimes if that's necessary to compromise. And these girls maybe are not given that opportunity at this point because, as you're saying, things are more scripted. And, frankly, people get a little bit more worried these days about having their kids out and about, or the sort of helicopter parent idea. So what do we do about that? What is our next step to helping these girls kind of get those skills?
Well, yes, you're right. There's a lot of, there's fear on the part of the parents and, the world has changed. So you can't blame parents to some degree for feeling worried about sort of that extended outside playtime, depending on where you live. Right. My kids have more playtime outside, more freedom in Connecticut when we are in Connecticut than when we are in California. And that's just sort of the facts. They've got the backyard in California, but in Connecticut they can roam, and that's just different living circumstances.
So true.
But the other thing, too, is that the thing I hear from moms of girls over and over again is, I want her to have every opportunity. I want her to have every opportunity. Yeah. So they're playing every sport, and they're taking every musical instrument, and they're taking voice lessons, and they're taking art classes, and they're taking cooking classes. They're doing 1,000 things. So they're exhausted. They're completely exhausted. They're not sleeping enough. What we know about kids and sleep is that when they don't get enough sleep, they are cranky and they have a hard time relating to other people. And they have a hard time listening, So and some of it sounds obvious, but when you really sit back and you look at your calendar of events for your kid, can you really do that gut check and say, yes, my kid has enough time to play, enough time to read and relax, enough time to get, 9 to 11 hours of sleep every single night, enough time for healthy, non-rushed meals. those things are important. And then the other thing that's important is that, and I love organized sports, I do. I mean, I was an athlete growing up and I played in college. So I am a proponent of organized sports. However, we are starting kids much, much younger, girls in particular, so that we're cutting childhood short to get a certain skill set for them. And they're also facing just toxic competition.
It's so true.
30 years ago, the competition in girls' sports was healthy. It's pretty toxic now in a lot of different sports, and I've seen it from a lot of different angles and dealing with my own daughter and clients and things. And so those are all things we really need to think about. I think the number one thing we can do right now, easy peasy, is slow down. Teach girls the value of slowing down and figuring out what they're really interested in. There's this whole thing about passion. I have to find my passion or passions. And it's like, you can't be passionate about something if you don't have time to think. I mean, you just can't, so really just slowing down and letting girls discover the world around them and letting them enjoy other girls, just enjoy friendships that aren't tied to anything. Why do they have to only be with their soccer friends or their dance friends or this friend or that friend? Why can't they just have these more organic friendships that just speak to them? We have to trust them that they know what they like and they know what they want and they know what they're doing. And we don't do that anymore. We don't trust kids. Yeah. So, that's an important piece. And then really talking openly and honestly with girls about what they're seeing, what they're doing. Kids watch more TV than they used to. And part of that is just there's more available than there used to be.
And more times.
There's more times. And, I joke with my kids all the time that it was like, well, there was like the electric company.
That's
and,
right.
One other show. And if you didn't hit it at exactly 5:00,
that's right.
Okay, So they are, and I don't like to blame media because I think there's a lot of good that comes out of media, but they are, these tween programmings for girls. I mean, I want to scratch my eyes out when I watch a lot of it,
Yes.
And I try to find the healthy things. I'm a huge fan of Just Add Magic. And there's a couple other shows that targeted for tween girls that I think are really well done and that don't include the toxic competition or the boy craziness and all that stuff. But we have to admit that a lot of girls are taking a lot of their cues from some of these things they're seeing on television, in the movies, even that they're reading in more modern, kid lit. Yes. So I think, we have to, if we're going to have that stuff in our lives and expose our kids to that, fine. But then we really need to talk about it and we need to be present when they're watching that stuff. And I mean, my daughter, I drive her nuts, but I will pause it and be like, can you believe what just happened? And we'll talk about it right there as it's happening because they need that feedback. They're sitting there, they're internalizing these cues. They're trying to figure out how to navigate girlhood. Well, we can either sit back, not say anything and let them take all those cues and do with it what they will, or we can help them work through it. And, when you're honest with kids and you talk to them and you ask them what they think about things, you really have meaningful conversations and you really help them.
Bingo. I mean, it is like, that is the crux of why I do what I'm doing right now. I think the conversation piece is so important and we do need to take the lead from our girls and we kind of have to take the leap, a little bit of courage and say, I might not know what the heck I'm about to say. And I don't know what conversation we're about to get into. And I don't know if I'm going to like what I'm about to hear, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I like what you're saying there, and I agree with you. It's important. So thinking back to, when I was in 5th grade, I wish I had spoken up for myself more. I mean, look, I was in 5th grade at the time. I'm certainly not like angry with myself or, like frustrated with myself. But like when I look back, I'm like, ooh, I just wish I had sort of changed directions, and I wish I had, sometimes I even think like, oh, if I had that chance to go back, like I wish I would have said this. I wish I had said that. Of course, this is not possible, but I have a daughter now, and, you and I both work with girls. So what, in your opinion, are some concrete tips that we could use as guides to help girls to be more assertive, especially in those situations where they don't like what's going on or they want things to go in a different direction?
Assertiveness training is so important. I can't highlight that enough. In my groups with girls, I spend a huge proportion of time helping these girls learn how to assert themselves, just helping them learn how to even just use their voices at all. I mean, there are times when I have 20 girls in a room just screaming no repeatedly so that they can get used to saying the word no, because girls are constantly told not to say no. Right. They are, socialized to believe that no is like this bad word. So then when they need to use it, it feels uncomfortable. Or when someone needs to use it on them to set a boundary, it feels devastating. And that shouldn't be the case either. We should all be able to set healthy boundaries and say no. And so that's kind of a word we all need to take back, but especially young girls. And then I teach them how to stand up straight, how to make eye contact, how to have an assertive voice that's not overpowering, but that can be heard and speak clearly and say what you mean. These are all things that girls really need to learn how to do. We're seeing all this stuff come out in the news right now. We have got to focus on assertiveness training now for girls and boys, but particularly for girls who are socialized to sort of shush and keep quiet. I mean, research still shows that boys are called on more frequently in the classroom and sort of get more bonuses from teachers in the classroom unintentionally, but it happens. So we really have to work on this. I always tell parents a really fun thing that families can do at home, girls and boys, is have a weekly family debate night and pick silly things. You want to do gummy bears, pro or con. And so one kid is going to be pro and the other's con, and they have the week to sort of figure out their arguments and maybe do some research online about gummy bears and what goes into them, whatever. And then you host a debate night, right? And everybody gets a turn to talk and somebody moderates it and somebody asks questions and they go back and forth. And, it sounds like a silly thing, but this kind of play is good for older kids. And we have a tendency to say, oh, kids get to be 8, 10 years old and they don't play anymore. And that is just not true. Play shifts as people grow. Adults play. You have a husband who goes out and plays basketball with his friends to blow off steam. That's playing, People continue to play as they grow. And we need to recognize that and find ways for kids to do it that makes it fun and gets the whole family involved, because that's how we work on things. This is tough stuff to work on, but when you make it fun, you can do it. And so, and then even just using literature or the movies and things that you're watching, Wonder is out now, and that's an amazing movie experience for a million reasons, but also to help kids look at, well, how is that one standing right now? What do you think he's feeling? And what does his eyes looking at the floor all the time tell you? Helping kids think about, well, what does my body language show and what does my voice tone show? When they can really pick that stuff apart, they can learn to amplify their voices and to stand a little taller.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I think my kids would actually like this kind of debate idea. We've started doing at the dinner table stories in a round. Everybody gets a line, because, I wanted my kids, and they also, they like it, but I wanted my kids to feel like they could, kind of make a story all together, and that they could all have a voice in creating a story, especially as they're learning in school how to write a story, how to, speak up for themselves. And it's a little, at first, especially for one of my children, it was a little bit scary. He was not wanting to participate because, you don't want to say something wrong. So even for those younger kids who you're like, well, I don't know if they could do a debate, but maybe they could do something where they're contributing to, a project that you're doing or a story that you're creating. It's just one way to kind of get them to lend their voice. And it is significant because whatever they say in this sort of story in a round changes the story. And that's right. It lends itself. So that's sort of like the little bit younger version. But I like what you're saying about this idea of debate, and hadn't thought much about that. But I think that could be a next iteration, arguments over gummy bears, yes or no?
Exactly. Well, it gives them a voice, a safe place to start voicing opinions. We all have strong opinions on things. Kids tend to be shushed and they tend to be told, keep your opinion a little lower. That's a mistake. They have to learn how to voice their opinions, and learning how to get some research to back it up or some thoughts to clearly back it up is helpful as they grow.
Sure. Well, speaking of research, I know that you talk a lot about research in your latest book, and there was a very large-scale study of over 10,000 women, the Dove Global Beauty and Confidence Report, that says that 7 in 10 girls with low body esteem say they won't be assertive in their opinion or stick to their decision if they aren't happy with the way that they look. Have you found that body esteem and the way that people look at their looks curbs the way that they are assertive or the way that they do or don't speak up for themselves?
Absolutely. I see, girls who will sort of try to hide, so they put on the big hoodie sweatshirt and they put up the hood, or they're wearing really loose clothing and they put up the hood and look down a little bit more. I absolutely see that in my office and in my groups a lot. When girls are not feeling good about how they look on the outside, or they're wondering about how they look to other people on the outside, they're less likely to voice their opinions because they somehow think they're not important and that their opinions don't matter as much as someone who feels good about themselves. So this whole, idea of confidence and self-esteem, and it can be body esteem, it can be just self-esteem, and even, sometimes people have very distorted body esteem. So, you look at them and say, wow, look at this strong young girl. She's, she looks like she plays a lot of sports and is very active and could climb a tree in 3 seconds. But that girl is not feeling that that's how she looks. So, we also have to be careful about making leaps. As parents, our gut reaction is to protect them in a variety of ways. And sometimes the way that we do that is that we accidentally dismiss their feelings. And so when a young girl goes to a parent and says, I don't think I look right, or I don't look like my friends, they say, of course you're beautiful. No, you're perfect, just the way you are. And while those are nice platitudes, they don't do anything for what the girl is actually feeling on the inside. And so I try to encourage parents to be able to take a deep breath when they hear something that scares them. We react that way when we're feeling nervous. Well, how could my daughter possibly feel this way? I think the world of her. And our anxiety prompts us to react in this sort of strong but dismissive way. And I try to encourage parents to take a few deep breaths and then ask a why question, or what makes you say that? Or tell me more about why you're feeling that way about your body, or, just really we can't be afraid to ask those questions either, to say like, well, tell me why you think that about your body. Can you explain to me what you're feeling about your body? We never want to have those conversations because we think it's like wrong to talk about bodies. They're thinking it. They're thinking about their bodies. Their bodies are changing and growing fairly rapidly throughout childhood and middle childhood. For us, it feels like it's a long journey. For them, it's constant. Their brains are changing. Everything is changing all at once. And they're bombarded with all these things in the media, and they're comparing themselves to their peers. And we say, don't make comparisons. Comparisons is the thief of joy. We have our cliches that we throw out, but that doesn't stop them from making those comparisons and wondering how they stack up. That's part of growing up. So again, getting back down to talking honestly with kids, not being afraid to say words. Are you feeling that way because you're starting to develop? Are you feeling that way because you think that your breasts are starting to bud? Like, no one wants to have these conversations. We can be honest, right? We're never ready for it. But we have to be ready for it. Like, we, the parents, have to stand in the mirror and say these words over and over and over again until they're normal for us.
Yeah, we could say them to friends if we want. I mean, it's just like to have an audience, because it's so important to practice. I know when I'm speaking to audiences about body image and girls, often there's a moment, and I feel it from the audience, where they are, I know, going over in their head what they have said or have not said in the exact situation that you just mentioned. And they're thinking, oh crap, I messed up. And I just want to underscore that it's okay if you were the one, after you just heard Katie say, did you just dismiss somebody, or, oh no, you're perfect the way you are. it's okay because we can always go back, right? We can always go back and say, I wish I'd handled that differently, and go back to your child and say, you know, you mentioned a couple weeks ago that you felt this way and I said this. Can we talk more about that? We
Absolutely.
Can go back, right?
I do this with my own daughter all the time where I'll, overthink something later, at night, and I'll go back to her and say, I said something to you yesterday and I wish I said it differently. Do you have a minute to talk about that so I can say what I meant to say or what I could have said a little bit differently, and we'll go back over it. And, I can see in her eyes that sort of recognition of, hey, I mean, first of all, we all make mistakes, right? We all say things that we think are the right thing and turn out to be the wrong thing. So, okay. And then that teaches her that, things aren't over just because a conversation ends. You can revisit it. You can say all the same things again if you need to say the same things again. But when we go back to our kids and say, I thought about something we said and I'm thinking that I want to go in a different direction, or I meant to say this, it sort of gives them permission to rethink the things that they've said or to, bring up other stuff. And I think that's just a good communication tool, good lesson.
And I love the idea that, we can make mistakes because we make so many of them. And, sometimes people think that somehow because we do this professionally that we somehow have these like amazing children that are perfect all the time and we are somehow perfect all the time. I mean, it's just like a laughable because it's so untrue. What we do have is the ability to like think about it later and go, wow, I really messed up just now. So that's nice. So I just want to, I just want people to all know we're on the same boat here, and we are far from perfect. And speaking of perfect, we know that can affect our self-esteem as parents, but it also can affect the self-esteem of kids. And I'm wondering, how does that fit into this whole idea, this like striving to be perfect? And then how can we kind of talk to girls and work with girls about perfectionism so that it doesn't interfere with their ability to speak up or be, friends with the people they actually want to be friends with instead of the people that are sort of telling them to be friends with them? How does that play a role?
Perfectionism is a big problem right now among young girls. And, as a partially reformed perfectionist, I can tell you, having gotten to the other side at some point in my adult life, the world is better when you're not putting an intense amount of pressure on yourself to be some version of perfect. And, I talk to girls a lot about the fact that we can strive for excellence. We can strive for success. We have to be willing to fall short. We have to be willing to stumble along the way because nobody gets from A to Z without hitting a single obstacle. That just doesn't happen in the world. Right. And unfortunately, I think one thing that young girls go through right now, because they are so much more enmeshed in media and things that are happening. They know way more about the world now than we did as girls, so yes. They're privy to so much more. And we really weren't. We just didn't know that much stuff. And they see so much stuff, even just looking over mom's shoulder when she's checking her Facebook feed or Instagram or things, they're always kind of, and they do that not because they're trying to be sneaky, but they're looking for clues. They're trying to figure out why we like it, for one thing. They're trying to figure out what we get out of it. And then they see things and they're trying to make sense of the things they see. So it's sort of like this whole convoluted thing. But girls are, because of all the competition right now. So the problem with all this toxic competition is that somebody always has to be the best. And if there's a best, well, then there's a worst. And who wants to be the worst? Right. So, but girls from very young ages, kindergarten, first grade, are getting thrown into soccer teams and softball teams.
Right, competitive, volleyball. Travel, yes.
Yeah, it's very highly competitive. It's intense. It's a lot of pressure. They're being told how to do things exactly right. And when they fall short, they're reprimanded for that, So that's one factor. Then we have the pushing down of academics. We are expecting much more of children at a younger age than we ever did. and they're constantly being assessed.
So unbelievably, I cannot believe what my second and third graders are learning and doing and expected to know. I cannot believe it, and I have no idea how I would have done in the same environment.
And, and I talked to a little girl recently who, I want my report card to be perfect. I want to get perfect grades. And I said, you're 9, that you're 9 and you don't actually have grades.
Right. Like you're just satisfied. Do you meet the requirements for the grade? That's it.
That's it. Right. Aim for 3. But, and she was like, but there's numbers. And if I get all the best numbers, I will get this reward.
Oh.
And I thought,
now we get it.
Right. And not every parent is doing this, but even the parents who aren't doing it, the kids, that's what they talk about at school. Well, what do you get if you get all 4s or all check pluses or, whatever your school
is, or all E's or whatever their thing is. Yes.
What do you get? Do you get money? Do you get ice cream? Do you get to go to the movies? What do you get? And I don't get it. Right. And so we forget that kids have these very detailed lives that don't include us. Right. They leave us
have conversations and things.
Yes. They talk about things. They hear things. They learn things. And some of it's great and some of it's not.
And bus talk can sometimes go in a bad direction.
Right. And so, so there's a lot of pressure right now on girls. So it's really no wonder that so many girls are struggling with perfectionism, because they're hearing it on the field. They're hearing it at school. They're getting it somewhere at home. They're comparing themselves to their siblings or their best friends or their cousins or, what have you. Parents are really wanting kids to be successful. I mean, the catchphrase of the public school system right now is college and career ready, and that starts in pre-kindergarten.
Oh, gosh, that's crazy.
Think about that.
College, take a preparatory school in kindergarten.
Right. Chew on that, and then think about, it's not really that off the mark that so many girls are struggling with this. So, the question is, what do we do? Well, we find outlets for them that are not competitive, that are just healthy. We find role models for them who can tell them about all the mistakes they made. I often, as an author, go into school classrooms and talk about the mistakes and talk about the failures, before I got to be an author, and talk about the missteps that, almost made me not become an author, so I am very open with kids going in and talking to them about how, yes, it's great. This is my second book with a major publishing house, and I'm very excited, and I hope a lot of people read it, but maybe only 2 people will, and I'm going to have to be okay with that.
I'll read it. I'll be one. I'll be one of the 2. I've already read it.
I think we get, kids to hear from, sometimes from athletes, college athletes and things, but also just from regular people that, in the world doing regular jobs, that, hey, it's hard. And some days are hard. And some days you really fall short. I mean, I have bad days where I don't get my work done, or the work that I do is not as great as I had planned it to be in my head before I started working. I can beat myself up about that, or I can take a break, sleep on it, and start again the next day and give myself a do-over. Right. We have got to teach girls that every day is a new day to start again. Yes. My father always used to say that the thing that he loved the most about sunsets was that if you had the perfect day, you had a great day, it's a beautiful way to end it with those colors just dripping from the sky. But if you had a lousy day, it was a beautiful way to end it with the colors dripping from the sky, because you knew that you got another shot the next day.
Oh, and gosh, I love your dad.
We need to say those things to young girls, very young. We've got to start, because they are engaging in these big girl things at young ages. Well, then we got to talk to them younger. We can't wait until it gets bad. By the time they get to me, they can't sleep at night. They don't want to go to school. They're not eating. They're, a mess. We've got to talk to them sooner before they hit that point.
So let's talk a little bit about those discussions. And I so appreciate that, because I think that the discussions are things that we have to have, and sometimes can be very scary, and we don't always know what to say. And having you as a guide in this case can be really helpful and calming for a lot of people. So let's say that you have a girl in front of you who has come home to tell you, or come into your office to tell you that girls are being mean, or she feels like there's nothing she can do about it. She may feel like she doesn't have friends, and you know that she's feeling really low. So what do you do or say to that child who has come to you with some low self-esteem and situations that are kind of feeding into it?
The first thing I always tell parents is to really slow down your own responses and be okay with sitting with silence for a couple of minutes, because it's better to be quiet for a couple of minutes and really think through your reactions than to overreact quickly and in the moment, because our girls take their cues from us. So if they come to us saying that they're basically dealing with relational aggression and they feel hopeless and they don't know how to handle it, and we immediately pick up our phones and start texting other moms and emailing the school and calling dad to get him in on it or whatever, they see that's an overreaction. It really is. And they see that and they start to become very anxious, because clearly this is a high alert situation that they have just revealed. And now they don't know what to do with all those feelings. So the first really best thing parents can do is empathize with their kids and just really listen and ask questions and listen to the answers. So instead of formulating in your brain, well, what's going to be my strategy? What's my plan of attack to fix this for my kid? Sit with your child, listen to the words that she's saying to you, empathize with her and say, oh my gosh, that sounds really, really hard. I can't imagine how that must feel for you at school. Can you tell me how you're feeling at lunch? Can you tell me how you're feeling when you're sitting at your desk? What kinds of things are you thinking when you're there at school? And a lot of times when we talk like that to kids, they will say, I'm thinking I want to come home. I'm missing you. I feel like I can't stay there anymore. They'll start really sharing those inner anxieties and those inner worries that they're struggling to get through all day long. And remember, when girls are going through this, they are in survival mode at school when they are away from you. You are their lighthouses. So, they are in survival mode. They are waiting for that beam of light to wash over them and make them feel better. So we can't panic. We have to listen and we have to ask more questions. While your daughter is starting to reveal things, sort of make a note of it in your brain so that you can scribble it down later, exactly what's happening. So you can get a clear picture of what's really happening at school, who's doing what, who's saying what, how is your daughter responding? And then just sometimes a simple answer is, what do you think will make you feel better at school? And you can kind of get to the root of what is it that your daughter needs? Well, having a friend. Okay. So, one thing I do with kids all the time is I make little friendship maps, because when they're at school for so long and they're in elementary school, they tend to be in one classroom. And even in middle school, they travel in packs from class to class a lot, depending on level, right? So they tend to see the same kids over and over again. And so I say, let's map out other friends. Okay, we know these are the people at school. Right now, these friendships aren't working and we're not sure why, but we know they're not working and that you're feeling really bad. And so we got to figure out, what we want to do is figure out, like, who else is a good touchstone for you at school? Like, who else might be a good friend? So was there anyone that you took choir with, or was there anyone that, is around in the neighborhood, but in a different classroom that you really like? So helping your daughter explore, who are the other people in my life? Because when girls are feeling hopeless, they're feeling like no one likes me. No one wants to be around me. They're all being mean to me, and so that's very overwhelming feeling if you have ever experienced it. Absolutely. I mean, it's devastating. Sure. So helping them realize that they're actually really not alone is the best first step. You will have time to deal with the school and the other parents and all of that stuff after you speak with your daughter. But when you are talking with your daughter, you've got to stay focused on her. And so map out those other friends that she has in life. And then talk about, well, how can we amplify those friendships? Let's think about, should we invite that girl over, tomorrow after school to just hang out? We can watch a movie, or you guys can just play outside, or, we can go to the park, whatever you want to do. Start getting your daughter thinking about there's always more than just one person in the world, so one person might be being really mean at school, and I'm going to help you with that. But let's think about a second person that is being kinder, that we can really focus on right now, because everyone needs to have one friend that they feel good about. None of us, we're not meant to be alone. We are social beings. So everybody needs one friend. So I think, really opening those doors to conversations, just asking more questions than giving answers really helps with young girls, because they have the answers and they want to communicate with their parents, but they don't always know how. Mm-hmm. And it feels embarrassing to try and talk about stuff like this. They feel like failures that they're being targeted at school. They're mortified that they have no friends, and that they think that they have no friends. So it's hard to bring this stuff up.
Right, absolutely. I love the idea of the friendship map and really, focusing on some of these other people who might be on the periphery and bringing them into full light. I remember speaking to somebody who told me that in his world, that when the other people were amplified, it dwarfed the importance of the person who was making his life less pleasant. So I really appreciate what you're saying. I'd like to flip this before we go into our top tip and just ask you for what to say if you find out that your daughter is on the opposite end, that she has made somebody else feel ostracized or belittled, that somebody else has mentioned that their daughter is feeling left out and hurt. What is the conversation that you can have with your child at that point?
Well, the first thing is you have to be willing to believe it, because 9 times out of 10, the problem I run into is that moms say to me, there's no way, she said she didn't do it. Of course she's going to say she didn't do it. She doesn't want to no one wants to get in trouble. And sometimes when we feel guilty, our gut response is to deny it because we wish we didn't do it. We wish we didn't say those things. And so I think, again, and it's hard to empathize when you think that your kid is doing something atrocious, but sitting down with your daughter and saying, it sounds like you are saying some really unkind things to other girls at school, and I want to understand what's going on. You must be having a really hard time and I'm not seeing it. And so I want to know what's going on. What's making you feel like you need to say those things? And yes, she's going to deny it the first time, and you're going to have to repeat the statement. And you may have to say, well, the teacher sent home a note that she overheard you say this and this to this little girl. Why would you choose to say those? To help me understand why you chose to use those words with that little girl. And let's think about how she might have felt when she heard those words, and just kind of like steer it towards empathy. Our gut instinct is to either deny it or to consequence. And honestly, if we want kids to shift their thinking and to learn how to connect better with other kids, then neither of those two things work. We have to really get down and dirty with them and talk about what's going on beneath the behavior. Every behavior is a form of communication, even targeting other kids. So let's find out what they're really trying to communicate when they do that.
Thank you for that. I think sometimes we leave this out of the conversation, that our daughter can actually be the one who is making somebody else feel bad. But I think it's important that we have that conversation. And I also appreciate what you're saying about believing it, because, it is our gut reaction to want to defend our child and think the best of them at all times. But there are many people who are saying unkind things at school or behaving in a way that makes other people feel inferior, and it can't always be everybody else. Sometimes it has to be your kid.
And I think, too, for parents who have heard this information or had another parent say your girl is being unkind, I can't reiterate enough for parents that just because your girl is doing unkind things right now or saying unkind things doesn't mean that she's not a good person. Right. It means that she is going through something and she doesn't know how to communicate in a better way. So she just hasn't learned it yet. So instead of thinking all is lost or thinking that your child is terrorizing other kids, take a deep breath and say to yourself, there are some skills she hasn't learned yet. We got to figure that out.
Right. My daughter and I, we often talk about how everybody's working on something. I say it to my son, too. Everybody's working on something. You're working on these skills. Somebody else is working on those skills. And, the intention is likely that they did not want to make you feel bad, or your intention may not have been to make that other person feel bad. But this is how it wound up coming out. So now what are we doing? So at this point, I would love to talk about your top tip. Out of out of everything we've discussed or maybe did not discuss, how can we best help girls cope best with relational aggression and help them to become the kind-hearted, happy, good people we know them to be?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing to say is to model it, because they learn so much from us. And that is generally a good tip, is to model kindness, model empathy, check our own reactions in the mirror when we're frustrated, when we're sad, when we're feeling disappointed by a friend or a relative. Really think about how we portray that to kids, how we handle rough spots, so that if our daughters are seeing any of that, that we're setting a good example. But the number one thing I would love to see more of from moms and dads of daughters is to spend more one-to-one uninterrupted time with them. Mm-hmm. The number one request of girls when I speak at schools to girls, when I have them in my girls groups, when they're just in my office, the number one request I ask every single girl I encounter, what do you want most from your mom or dad? And they say, time alone. We are on our phones too much. Mm-hmm. I'm guilty at times. We are on our phone too much. We are relying too much on instant gratification. We are relying too much on being super connected to the outside world at all times. They want us to snuggle up and watch a movie. Yes. They want us to go out to In-N-Out and get a burger and some fries and talk. They want to go hiking. They want to ride bikes. They want to be together. They want time with dad. They want time with mom. They want time with their favorite aunt. It's not too much to ask, right. to build in that time. That is when they will do their talking. That is when they will ask us the burning questions that are swirling around in their little minds. And those moments are they're critical. I always tell parents between the ages of 9 and 12 is make it or break it for self-esteem. It's absolutely, that is it. It's make it or break it. They are either going to fly or they are going to tank. Spend that time with your girls, because you can help them fly if you just give them your time.
Well, that's a quotable, and I really appreciate you saying that. Sometimes I think we do need to sacrifice our connection with the outside world so that we can bolster the connection with our children.
Right.
So thank you for that. I'm so excited to get your book out to the world, and I feel like it's really going to bless this world with so many great skills. I like the stories you provide in it. I like the tips you provide in it, and you really feel like you're talking to us. How can we get a hold of your book and give me the resource of the week?
Well, the book is available for pre-order everywhere that books are sold now. I love it if you went to your favorite local independent bookstore and requested to put a copy on hold. It will be available for purchase January 30th, but you can pre-order it now. And I do love my indie bookstores, but
perfect. That could be the resource of the week.
Yep. And in the event that you can't get there, you can also do IndieBound, which is online, or of course all the Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and the big ones. But I do love to support our local independent bookstores, because they are doing great work getting the best books into our hands, and I love that about them.
Okay, and your website is?
And my website is practicalkatie.com, and you can find me on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else, although I try to balance it.
Yes, and we will be tweeting this out and getting it out on Facebook. We want people to learn all about you and your book and the wonderful tips that you provide. I just so appreciate you joining us today, and you've provided some great talking points, some important things to think about. This idea of connection and really listening and being quiet and asking good questions. All of these things are important to build the self-esteem of our girls and start to reduce this mean girl culture. So thank you so much for being on the show and talking to us about your perspectives.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your support.
Of course, anytime. Well, I've got my takeaways, and sweet friends, I know you have yours. Let's discuss them. Come up on Facebook. Let's go to the Dr. Robyn Silverman page, or let's chat about it at drrobynsilverman.com or twitter.com/Dr. Robyn. And if you love this podcast like I did, and Katie Hurley's done an incredible job giving so many great tips, I hope you'll come up to iTunes, rate, review it, and share it with everybody you know. We want to bolster that self-esteem of our girls and really help them thrive and fly, as Katie's saying. I truly appreciate it. That's all the time we have for today. My fellow parents, leaders, and educators, thank you so much for tuning in to How to Talk to Kids About Anything. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com. So many great podcasts. Show notes are up there as well. I look forward to weathering the storms and enjoying the sunny side of life together. And please remember, even on the days when you fall short, you've got this. You're here. You're getting the information you need. You can back up. You can do it again. I know it's not easy, but never forget there's always tomorrow. Parenting is the ultimate do-over. I see you. I'm right there with you. And as there's moments when we doubt our know-how, our choices, and our sweet sanity, please know you are 10 times the parent you think you are. You really are. Until next time, this is Dr. Robyn Silverman with How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Please tune in again and keep connecting through conversation. See you next week.
You've been listening to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com.